She thought no one saw her struggle. But someone was watching. And he wasn't just any customer. Real stories. Real lessons. Welcome to Story's True Vibe. Jacob Reed, the CEO of a small diner chain with 13 locations, had built his business from scratch over the last decade. He prided himself on creating a family-friendly atmosphere. But lately, things fell off. Customer complaints about slow service and rude staff had been piling up, and employee turnover was at an all-time high. Jacob's regional managers assured him everything was fine, but the reports didn't match the whispers he'd been hearing. Frustrated and determined to see the truth for himself, Jacob decided to go undercover at one of his locations. He picked a diner in a suburban town 2 hours away from his corporate office. It was far enough that no one would recognize him. Most of his employees had never met him in person. To make sure he blended in, Jacob grew out a scruffy beard, ditched his tailored suits for a worn-out hoodie and jeans, and put on a pair of thick-rimmed glasses. He looked nothing like the polished executive who appeared on the company website. He walked into the diner at lunchtime, the place buzzing with chatter and clinking dishes. The dining area looked clean but dated, the booths slightly worn. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the warm, welcoming space Jacob had envisioned when he started the company. A young waitress with tired eyes approached him, her name tag reading, "Megan." "Hi there, welcome," she said, her voice cheerful but strained. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" Jacob noticed the faint bags under her eyes and the hesitation in her smile. Something about her seemed off, but he brushed it aside. "Just coffee, thanks," he said, sliding into a booth near the window. Megan nodded and hurried off, weaving between tables with practiced efficiency. Jacob watched as she juggled multiple orders, refilled drinks, and picked up plates from the kitchen. She was clearly overworked, but she never showed her frustration to the customers. When Megan returned with his coffee, Jacob ordered a burger and fries. As she scribbled on her notepad, a man's voice boomed from the kitchen. "Megan! What's taking so long? You're falling behind, again." The voice belonged to a short, stocky man in his 40s wearing a stained apron. Jacob guessed he was the shift manager. He hadn't introduced himself to Jacob when he came in, something Jacob noted. Megan flinched at the tone but nodded quickly. "Coming right up," she called back, her voice cracking slightly. Jacob frowned. He had built this business on the idea that employees should feel valued, not berated in front of customers. He sipped his coffee and decided to keep watching. As he waited for his food, he overheard snippets of conversation from other tables. A family at the booth behind him complained about waiting too long for their meal. A pair of teenagers whispered about how rude the manager had been to their waitress earlier. The atmosphere felt tense, far from the friendly diner experience Jacob had envisioned. When Megan brought out his burger, she apologized for the delay. "Sorry about the wait," she said softly, avoiding eye contact. "No worries," Jacob replied, offering a small smile. "You're doing great." Her eyes flicked up for a moment, surprised, before she nodded and hurried off again. Jacob had barely taken a bite when he heard muffled sobbing coming from the kitchen. He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. The sound grew louder, unmistakable now. It was Megan. He set his fork down and strained to listen. "I'm trying my best, okay?" Her voice cracked through the thin walls. "I haven't had a break in 6 hours, and I'm doing everything I can." The manager's voice cut in, dismissive and sharp. "If you can't handle the pressure, maybe you're in the wrong job. We don't have time for excuses." Jacob's stomach turned. He couldn't sit still. He slid out of the booth, leaving his half-eaten burger behind, and walked toward the kitchen door. What he saw made his chest tighten. Megan stood with trembling hands, wiping her eyes with the back of her sleeve. The manager loomed over her, arms crossed, his face twisted in frustration. Two cooks avoided looking at the scene, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to step in. Jacob clenched his fists, his heart pounding. This wasn't the company he'd built. "Is there a problem here?" Jacob asked, his voice calm but firm. The manager turned, startled. No, just a little miscommunication. Megan shook her head, tears still pooling in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. Jacob looked at her, then back at the manager. He didn't reveal who he was yet. Instead, he said, "She looks like she needs a break. Why don't you let her sit down for a few minutes?" The manager scoffed. "We're short-staffed. There's no time for breaks during the rush." Jacob's jaw tightened. "There's always time to treat people with respect," he said evenly. The tension in the room was thick as Jacob held the manager's gaze. He knew he couldn't stay silent much longer. The manager's lips pressed into a thin line, but before he could respond, one of the cooks, a wiry young man with nervous energy, spoke up. "Megan's been nonstop since she clocked in. She hasn't even had time to grab a drink of water." His voice was hesitant, but there was quiet defiance in his tone. The manager shot him a glare. "Stay out of it, Connor. Focus on your station." Jacob's eyes flicked to Connor, then back to the manager. "And who's in charge of making sure your team can focus? Because from where I'm standing, it seems like the pressure is coming from how this place is being run." The manager's face flushed, his bravado slipping for a moment. "Look, I'm just doing my job. If people can't handle it, that's not on me." Jacob's gaze hardened. "We'll see about that." Megan, still wiping her eyes, looked at Jacob with confusion and a hint of gratitude. "I'll be fine," she muttered, though her voice wavered. She turned toward the door, but Jacob gently stopped her. "Take 5, he said softly. "You've earned it." The manager started to protest, but Jacob held up a hand, his tone leaving no room for argument. "She's taking a break now." Megan hesitated, glancing nervously between Jacob and the manager before nodding and slipping past the swinging kitchen doors. Jacob turned his attention back to the manager, his voice calm but steely. "What's your name?" "Rick," the man replied, his tone defensive. "And who are you to come in here and tell me how to run my shift?" Jacob ignored the question. "How long have you been the manager here, Rick?" Rick folded his arms. "About 2 years. And I've kept this place running just fine, so I don't need some random customer stepping in." "And you call this fine?" Jacob interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "Your staff is overworked, your customers are complaining, and you're berating people in the middle of their shifts. That's not fine. It's a mess." Rick opened his mouth to argue, but Jacob cut him off again. "You might want to think about how you're treating people, because I guarantee if I were your boss, this wouldn't fly." Rick's face paled slightly, but he quickly tried to mask it with a scoff. "Right. Well, you're not my boss, so—" Before he could finish, the kitchen doors swung open and Megan reappeared, her face slightly more composed. She kept her head down as she walked past Rick and back toward the dining area. Jacob decided it was time to step back and observe again, for now. He gave Rick one last pointed look before turning and following Megan into the dining room. Back at his booth, Jacob watched as Megan returned to her routine. She moved a little slower now, her exhaustion more apparent, but she still managed a small smile for every customer she served. Jacob noticed her taking extra care with a young mother struggling to keep her toddler entertained, offering crayons and a paper menu for the child to color on. He also noticed Rick glaring at her from the kitchen window. Jacob took out his phone and discreetly started taking notes. He jotted down everything he'd observed: Rick's behavior, Megan's workload, the complaints from customers. He also noted Connor's quiet defense of his coworker. After finishing his meal, Jacob flagged Megan down. "Can I get the check?" he asked, keeping his tone light. She nodded and quickly brought it over, along with the receipt. "Thanks for stopping by. Sorry again about earlier," she said quietly. "No need to apologize," Jacob replied, slipping some cash into the billfold. "You're doing great." Her cheeks flushed slightly, and she offered a small, genuine smile. "Thank you." As she walked away, Jacob made a decision. He wasn't done here, not by a long shot. He stood, grabbed his jacket, and made his way to the door. But before leaving, he paused and glanced back at the dining room. Megan was refilling a customer's coffee, her movements careful but efficient. Rick was barking orders at Connor in the kitchen. Jacob's jaw tightened. He pushed open the door and stepped outside, pulling out his phone. "Janet," he said when his assistant answered. "I need you to clear my schedule for tomorrow and get me everything we have on the staff at the suburb: name, location, employee files, performance reviews, all of it." "Got it," Janet replied without hesitation. "Anything else?" Jacob glanced back at the diner one last time before walking to his car. "Yeah," he said. "Make sure my regional managers are ready for a meeting. We need to talk." He hung up and slid into the driver's seat, his mind already racing with plans. Tomorrow, Jacob wasn't just going to observe. He was going to take action. The next morning, Jacob arrived at the diner just after opening, wearing the same scruffy disguise as the day before. This time, he carried a small notebook in his pocket, and a renewed sense of determination. He wasn't here to sit on the sidelines anymore. The morning shift was quieter, giving Jacob a chance to observe without the chaos of the lunch rush. Megan was already on the floor, her movements deliberate but slower than the day before. She looked even more drained, her smile thinner. Rick wasn't in sight yet, but Connor was in the kitchen, prepping ingredients. Jacob waited until Megan passed by with a coffee pot before calling her over. "Hey, Megan," he said, keeping his tone casual. "Do you have a second?" She hesitated, glancing at the few customers scattered around the diner. Sure, but I can't stay long. We're short-staffed again." "I won't keep you," Jacob promised. "I just wanted to ask, how long have you been working here?" She blinked at the question, clearly caught off guard. "About 8 months. Why?" Jacob leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "You seem like you're carrying a lot on your shoulders. Is it always this busy?" Megan hesitated, her eyes darting toward the kitchen window. "It's not always the customers," she said quietly. "Sometimes it's—" She trailed off, biting her lip. "It's Rick, isn't it?" Jacob asked gently. Her head snapped up, and for a moment she looked panicked. "I shouldn't." "You don't have to say anything," Jacob interrupted, keeping his voice soft. "I just want to understand what it's like for you here." Megan hesitated again, then sighed. "It's not just him. It's everything. We're always short-staffed, and when things get hectic, he just makes it worse. I know he's under pressure too, but it feels like we're always the ones paying for it." Jacob nodded, his mind racing. He decided to push a little further. "What about Connor? He seems like he tries to help." Megan's expression softened slightly. "Connor's great. He's only been here a few months, but he's one of the few people who actually cares. He covers for people when they're struggling. Honestly, if it weren't for him, I probably would have quit by now." Before Jacob could ask more, the kitchen door swung open and Rick strode out. His presence immediately shifted the energy in the room. Megan's shoulders tensed, and she quickly excused herself to refill a customer's coffee. Rick didn't seem to notice Jacob as he barked instructions at Connor, who nodded silently while dicing vegetables. Jacob's jaw tightened. This wasn't just stress, this was a pattern. Jacob let the morning play out, watching how Rick interacted with the staff and how the team managed despite the clear tension. By the time the lunch rush started, the diner was back to its usual pace, and Megan was running between tables again. It wasn't long before the first incident occurred. A customer, an older man in a flannel shirt, flagged Megan down to complain about his eggs being overcooked. Megan apologized and offered to have the kitchen remake them. "Can you just do your job right the first time?" the man grumbled. Megan's face flushed, but she kept her composure. "I'm really sorry about that. I'll get it fixed right away." Rick, who had overheard the exchange, stormed out of the kitchen. "What's the problem here?" he demanded, glaring at Megan. "It's fine," the customer replied, waving him off. "She's handling it." Rick turned to Megan anyway. "How many times do I have to tell you to double-check the orders before they go out?" This is basic stuff. Jacob stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, drawing everyone's attention. That's enough, he said firmly, his voice cutting through the room. Rick turned, his face twisted in annoyance. And who the hell do you think you are? Jacob reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, flipping it open to reveal his company ID. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the authority behind it. I'm Jacob Reed, he said, locking eyes with Rick. I own this diner, and 13 others just like it. The room went silent. Megan froze mid-step, her eyes wide. Connor peeked out from the kitchen, his knife still in hand. Even the customers seemed to hold their breath. Rick's face went pale, then flushed red. I didn't realize. No, you didn't, Jacob cut him off. Because if you had, you wouldn't be treating my staff like this, or my customers. Rick stammered, but Jacob didn't give him a chance to recover. Let's talk in the back, Jacob said sharply, motioning toward the office. Rick hesitated, then nodded stiffly and walked toward the kitchen. Jacob followed, pausing only to glance at Megan. I won't let this slide, he said quietly. In the office, Jacob shut the door and turned to Rick. Do you have any idea how out of line you've been? He asked, his voice low but firm. Rick opened his mouth, but Jacob held up a hand. Save it. I've seen enough. You've been with this company for 2 years, and in that time, you've managed to create a toxic environment for your team. Do you have any idea what that does to morale? To customer service? To the business? Rick looked down, his bravado completely gone. I get it, Jacob continued. This job isn't easy. But that doesn't give you the right to treat people the way you do. Rick swallowed hard. I can do better, You're done, Jacob interrupted, his voice final. I'm letting you go. Effective immediately. Rick shot up, his eyes wide. Wait, you can't. I can, Jacob said firmly. And I will. I'll make sure HR processes your severance package, but you're no longer part of this company. Rick stood frozen for a moment before nodding stiffly and walking out of the office without another word. Jacob exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. He didn't relish firing people, but this was necessary. When he stepped back into the dining area, all eyes were on him. Megan and Connor stood near the kitchen, their expressions a mix of shock and cautious hope. Jacob took a deep breath and addressed the room. I want to thank everyone for their hard work, he said, his voice steady. Things are going to change around here, starting today. He looked directly at Megan and Connor. You two, meet me after your shift. We need to talk. The tension in the room began to ease, replaced by a buzz of curiosity and quiet relief. Jacob knew this was just the beginning, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was steering his company in the right direction. After the last customer left and the lights dimmed in the dining area, Megan and Connor stood awkwardly by the counter, waiting for Jacob to speak. The hum of kitchen appliances was the only sound. They both looked exhausted, but there was a quiet hope in their eyes. Jacob had spent the rest of the day observing without interfering, but now, it was time to act. All right, let's sit, Jacob said, motioning to a booth near the back. He slid into one side while Megan and Connor hesitated, then took the other. Jacob leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. First, I want to say thank you. I know today was rough, especially with everything going on, but you handled yourselves with professionalism and care. That's more than I can say for some of the leadership this place has had. Megan glanced at Connor, unsure how to respond. Connor fidgeted with the edge of his apron. I didn't know things had gotten this bad, Jacob admitted, his voice softer now. That's on me. I've been too distant. I built this company to be a place where people feel valued, employees and customers, and somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. Megan finally spoke, her voice hesitant. It's not all bad. I mean, I've worked worse jobs, but it's been hard. I do love the customers though. I just wish. She trailed off, uncertain. Wish what? Jacob asked gently. She shrugged. I just wish it felt like someone cared. Really cared about us, not just about numbers or how fast we can turn tables. Jacob nodded, letting her words sink in. And you, Connor? He asked. Connor looked up, his voice quiet but steady. Honestly, I didn't plan to stay long. But I couldn't leave, not with how much Megan and the others have to deal with. Someone needs to have their back. Jacob felt a pang of guilt. These two were the backbone of the diner, holding it together while he sat in an office, trusting reports and spreadsheets. Well, that changes now, Jacob said firmly. But I'm not just going to tell you things will improve, I'm going to show you. Megan and Connor looked at him, curiosity and skepticism flickering in their eyes. Here's what's going to happen, Jacob continued. First, I'm bringing in a new manager. Someone with experience, and someone who knows how to lead with respect. In the meantime, I'll personally oversee things here until we get everything on track. Megan's eyes widened. You mean, you're staying? Jacob nodded. For as long as it takes. Connor tilted his head. And Rick? He's not coming back? No, Jacob said simply. I don't tolerate that kind of behavior. And neither should you. Connor let out a small breath of relief. Megan's shoulders sagged, as if a weight had been lifted. Second, Jacob continued, I'm revisiting the staffing structure. No more being short-staffed during peak hours. We'll hire more people, and I'll make sure everyone gets proper breaks. You can't take care of customers if you're running on empty. Megan gave a small smile. That would be amazing. And third, Jacob said, his tone softening, I want to reward the two of you for everything you've done to keep this place afloat. Megan and Connor exchanged surprised looks. Reward us? Megan asked cautiously. Jacob nodded. Connor, you've shown incredible loyalty and leadership, even in the short time you've been here. I'm promoting you to assistant manager. You'll get a raise and more consistent hours. Connor's jaw dropped. Wait, are you serious? I've never managed anything before. Jacob smiled. You already are. You've been stepping up when no one else would. That's what leadership looks like. Connor blinked, his face a mix of shock and gratitude. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Jacob turned to Megan. And you, Megan, 8 months of dedication, even when things were at their worst. I see how much you care about the customers and your coworkers. You deserve more than just a pat on the back. Megan's eyes shimmered, and she quickly looked down, embarrassed. I'm just doing my job. You're doing more than that, Jacob said. Starting next week, Jacob said gently, I'm giving you a significant pay raise. And I want to set up a bonus system for the whole staff. Hard work like yours deserves to be recognized. Megan's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, really? Really, Jacob replied, smiling. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of his words settled between them like a quiet miracle. Then Megan whispered, Thank you? I mean it, thank you. Jacob leaned back, his expression soft. You've earned it. As their conversation wrapped up, Jacob laid out more of his plans to improve the diner, updating the outdated kitchen equipment, implementing a better scheduling system, and holding regular team meetings to listen to staff concerns. By the time they left the booth, both Megan and Connor looked lighter, like a tension that had been slowly grinding them down had finally lifted. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. True to his word, Jacob showed up, day after day. Working alongside the staff, bussing tables, checking in with customers, and listening to feedback. He personally interviewed candidates for the manager position, ultimately hiring a woman named Denise. Her experience and empathetic leadership style quickly won over the team. Raises were processed. Megan and Connor both received the increases Jacob had promised. 3 new hires joined the team, easing the workload during peak hours. The atmosphere in the diner transformed. Customers noticed it too. The service was faster. The staff actually smiled, Not out of obligation, but because they felt valued. The diner no longer felt like a place to endure, but a place to belong. One afternoon, as Jacob prepared to leave for the corporate office, Megan stopped him by the door. "Hey," she said, smiling. "I just wanted to say, this place feels different now. Better. Like it actually matters." Jacob smiled back. "It does matter. And so do you." As he walked to his car, Jacob felt a sense of pride he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about profits or expansion anymore. It was about the people, the ones who showed up every day, who gave their all, who made it all work. And he wasn't going to forget that again. Leadership isn't about control, it's about care. This story reminds us that when we stand up for others, we change more than just the workplace, we change lives. Pushpin if this story moved you. White heavy checkmark like. Memo comment your thoughts. Bell subscribe to Stories True Vibe for more real-life motivational stories. Glowing star stay strong. Stay inspired. Stories True Vibe, where every struggle has a victory.